Order. Order. We now move to the welfare of doctors, and I call Peter Prinsley to move the motion. I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge, I'm sorry to say, to wind up, as is the convention in these 30-minute debates. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Sir John, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Our NHS is described as broken. Gigantic waiting lists, ambulance delays, collapsed confidence that the NHS is there when we need it, poor access to general practice, dentistry and pharmacy, and, disgracefully, falling life expectancy in some places. These are all failures of the last government, which could not look after the NHS despite record funding. Labour must mend the NHS. We have no choice. We invented the NHS, we fixed it before, and we'll fix it again. But today I speak about the people who work in the NHS. There are nearly 1.5 million of them, all contributing in their own way. But let me speak specifically today about our doctors. The doctors in this country are in crisis. Doctors are leaving the profession, retiring too soon, and emigrating. So who is looking after our doctors? Now, I come to this place as a surgeon. I'm one of the very few surgeons ever elected to Parliament. My dad was an RAF medic serving in World War II in Aden before joining the newly invented NHS in 1948, becoming a consultant physician in Teesside, where I grew up, and then a professor of geriatric medicine in Melbourne. He wrote an excellent account of his life called New Ideas for Old Concerns, which is full of fascinating accounts of his medical experiences during the war and later in the new NHS. It was a time of such hope and optimism, and I sincerely wish that we'll be able to recreate that hope today. Sure.
I spoke to him beforehand to bring a specific to bring up a specific issue, because I think it's important, and I commend him on this debate. It's so important, the welfare of doctors. The honourable gentleman will be aware GPs in Northern Ireland pay the highest indemnity costs in the United Kingdom, and that adds to the primary workforce pressures. The Medical Defence Union is working with government here in Westminster, in Northern Ireland, to find a long-term solution. So does the honourable member agree that support here would be helpful to give the Northern Ireland Executive to address this issue and get our GPs and doctors in Northern on par with them just here? Thank you.
So I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I will speak of general practice shortly. My son is an A&E doctor right here in London, and I am one of, therefore, 3 generations of doctors who've served the NHS continuously since it began. So the welfare of the doctors is personal for me. Now, this government has already done much for the doctors. They're on the front line and not the picket line for the first time in several years. But burnout, fatigue and stress are still very real problems which threaten to undermine the efficacy of our NHS. Today's new doctors graduate into the profession with debts of nearly £100,000. They immediately enter a lottery to be appointed to their first jobs as pre-registration doctors, sometimes ending up miles away from family and friends in places they've never visited before. Now that reminds me of another job that I just started. Young doctors are left immediately responsible for life and death decisions, sometimes with insufficient support. They're left scrabbling at the very last minute for somewhere to live, since the on-call accommodation that my generation remembers has disappeared, and I have known several of them to sleep in their cars. It's not escaped my notice that the new name for junior doctors is resident doctors. Resident doctors. That is the very last thing they are. If they're lucky, there's a place for them to rest, but many a time I've arrived to find a young doctor fast asleep from exhaustion at an office desk.
Will the honourable member please give way?
Sure.
The honourable member giving way. Considering that there is a desperate need for us to have more doctors in the NHS, does my friend agree that we really need to be looking after the present welfare, the welfare of the present doctors that we have, in order to encourage more people to enter the medical profession?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his intervention, and I do agree with that, as you will see. There are odd shifts, night duties without hot food, and days and weeks which can go by without an opportunity to meet supervising consultants. Short clinical attachments mean the relationships previously created with senior mentors are rare. Just last week, I received an email from a surgeon who was my consultant in 1986. He'd noticed in the surgical journal that I'd become an MP, and I remembered him as the brilliant surgeon that he was. These are the relationships that make you feel as if you belong within a wider profession. And I am doubtful that young trainees of today would have the chance to make such lasting connections. There is little security of employment, as doctors are obliged to apply every year or two for another post, probably in another place. The doctor's mess used to be a place where young doctors could find a sort of surrogate family in an unfamiliar place, but this is now, sadly, of the past. According to research from the BMA, fewer than 10% of UK trusts or health boards offer hot food after 11 o'clock at night. The demands of the job affect relationships. Many young doctors are in relationships with fellow doctors, but lucky indeed is the couple who can work and live in the same place, or even contemplate raising young families together. Relationship difficulties and breakdowns are sadly commonplace. Holidays must be taken at odd times, and rotas are inflexible. Doctors are left unable to take a day off to attend a wife's graduation, a sister's wedding, or even their own wedding. All true. Progression in a chosen career depends on multitude, competitive interviews, and hugely costly professional exams. There is no security of employment. Now, in a survey called Fight Fatigue, conducted by the College of Anaesthetists, 50% of respondents said they'd had an accident or a near miss when driving home after a night shift, and I recall fatalities such as this in my own hospital. 84% were too tired to drive home after a night shift. Only 64% had access to any rest facilities. Now, what would you say if the same were true of airline pilots, to whom anaesthetists are sometimes compared? Sure.
I thank him, the Honourable Member, for giving way. Last week I met with a GP in my constituency of Horsham, and she described very much what you're talking about. At the end of the day, after blitzing through 25 patients, one after the other, back to back, she would find herself sitting in her car, sometimes just simply too tired to drive home for half an hour. Would he agree that we are placing and expecting too much of our medical staff in terms of relying on their dedication beyond the call of duty?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I do agree with exactly what he's just said. In a recent survey of hospital doctors, 29% said they were not able to take any breaks at all during the working day, and for GPs this rose to 40%. 40%. This is simply not safe, either for doctors or for patients. In 2023, a survey conducted by the College of Surgeons found that half of the respondents cited poor working conditions as the main challenge in their job. And it is no wonder that so many colleagues are retiring too soon. The average age for a radiologist to leave the NHS is now 56, yet we are desperately short of these vital specialists. And this is happening across many specialties. Just in 2023, 23,000 English doctors left the profession prematurely. We cannot afford to lose our most experienced doctors. Too often, they're discouraged from continuing in practice by a bureaucratic and costly appraisal and revalidation process and simply throw in the towel. Their experience is a vital asset to the NHS, and we must think carefully about how we retain them or return them to the workforce. I think one solution will be to create simple routes for experienced doctors to practice flexibly. Sure.
Thank you, Sir John, and I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He's making a very powerful speech. Langport Surgery, in my constituency, Glastonbury and Somerton, are in the all too common position where they struggle to attract and retain staff due to stretched budgets, limiting their ability to offer attractive terms and conditions to working these under very challenging roles. So does the honourable member agree with me that the recruitment recruitment and retention of crisis that is particularly facing rural GPs is negatively impacting doctors' welfare, and urgent steps must be taken to address this.
I thank my honourable member for her intervention, and I do agree completely with exactly what she has said, which will be no surprise. Now, the training of doctors is under threat. I spoke in the House of how cash-strapped universities are issuing redundancy notices to clinical professors, with no real plan how we will teach the increasing number of medical students, or how we will continue the vital medical research for which our country has such a strong reputation. There has been a 31% decline in the number of clinical academics in this country between 2004 and 2022. Something must be done about this. And GPs. They are under pressure as never before. Who is looking out for our GPs? They face massive lists of patients and huge demands. We know we must support them, for they are the front door of our NHS. Sure.
In his very articulate and persuasive statement. In my constituency of Birmingham Perry Bar, we have surgeries such as the Al-Shafa Medical Centre, which has more than 6,000 patients. And now with the pressure on the NHS, more work needs to be done in local surgery, such as the basic analysis and the experiments in terms of cardiovascular disease and so forth. Does the honourable member agree with me that when a GP practice such as that has the additional burden in terms of paying with the national insurance increase, there needs to be some more methods, or maybe redirecting income so that they can sustain the great work that they do in constituencies?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I do agree that we must put resources into general practice to deal with the government's plan to move care from the hospital out into the community, and I'm sure this needs to be addressed. Now, the partnership model, which has served us so well, is now surely threatened, as fewer young GPs are prepared to take the responsibility and the financial risk of general practice. There are... Sure.
Thank you, Sir John, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for bringing this really important debate, which I feel could have been extended very easily beyond a mere 30 minutes. On that pressure and that responsibility for GPs looking to become partners, I'll just cite the example of the Silverdale practice in Burgess Hill in my constituency of Mid Sussex, where over December, January, they've had a problem with the sewers being blocked up, resulting in contaminated water coming up into the surgery and into the car park. And the point is that it's taken them weeks to get support from the NHS. The pressure on those GP partners, on their practice managers, must be huge. Does the honourable member agree with me that there needs to be more support for GPs who are prepared to take on the responsibilities of partnership?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I do agree, and I do believe that the government does intend to do something about the somewhat terrible state of the GP premises. Only yesterday, the Health Secretary confirmed this. There are serious questions about the support that the individual GPs receive, especially for mental health. Now, at present, GPs rely on the NHS Practitioner Health Service for addiction and mental health support. Sure.
The old saying of physician heal thyself is one that we should not be looking to within our National Health Service, and it's really critical that we get that practitioner health service available across all parts of the United Kingdom. The member may not be aware it's not currently available in Northern Ireland, and would he encourage this government to work with the executive to make sure all our health professionals get that same standard of care that they want to give to their patients?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I was not aware that it was not available in Northern Ireland, and certainly I do agree that it ought to be. This service was only designed to be used by 0.5% of GPs, but in fact it's been accessed by 10 times that number. Now, ensuring services like this are fully funded will be important. Alcohol and drug abuse, loneliness, depression, insomnia, anxiety, and sadly, suicide. Suicide. 2 of those I graduated with from Sheffield, both in their very first year. 2 doctors, a psychiatrist and neurosurgeon from my own road in Norwich, and one of my own trainees rescued at the last minute from a very serious attempt. All doctors know of this problem, but few speak of it. I informed the House last week of my former student who described the terrible flashbacks and PTSD of the young clinical ITU staff who witnessed 40 of 50 COVID admissions die at a hospital in Yorkshire and the complete lack of support they received. Many are reluctant to seek help, do not know where to turn, and itinerant junior doctors not registered with GPs are known to self-medicate. We simply cannot leave them on their own. So, in conclusion, may I respectfully make some suggestions which I believe have little or no cost implications. I am especially thinking of our resident doctors when I make these. So, first, identified mentors, not simply people called educational supervisors, simplified contracts and transferable across trusts between hospitals, clear early information for the doctors about what they'll be paid, their rotas, their timetables and their holidays, hot food at night, places to rest and sleep, exam fees covered with examinations that are fair and achievable, parking for them in the hospitals, and crucially, a GP for every doctor, and very simple access to mental health support. Medicine is a brilliant career, satisfying, interesting and rewarding, but let's look after the doctors who look after us. Thank you.
Before I call the Minister of State Health to respond, could I ask the Minister just to finish a little before 4:30 so I can put the motion? Minister of State, Karen Smith.
Thank you, Sir John, and of course I will adhere to your instructions, conscious of time. But I'm really grateful to the honourable member, my friend for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, for bringing. This is a really important topic to bring to the House today, and I know it's close to his heart as a working doctor himself. And I do want to thank him for his continued dedication, and indeed his family's dedication to the NHS, both as a surgeon and now as an MP. We welcome the knowledge and expertise he has already brought, and I think he's done that powerfully today. And what a lovely memento of his own father's service he has of that time. I would also like to thank him for highlighting the incredible role that resident doctors play in our NHS, and we do absolutely recognise the challenges that resident doctors are facing as they progress through postgraduate training. And is committed to giving them the support that they need to develop and thrive in the NHS. My honourable friend spoke passionately about the welfare of doctors, but also let me acknowledge the tireless professionalism and dedication that all health professionals are showing across the NHS on a day-to-day basis, which I know is something he will agree with. The NHS is broken, but we have a plan to fix it. Lord Darcy identified in his investigation into the state of the NHS last year that this government has inherited an NHS that is in serious trouble with record waiting lists, people struggling to see their GP and the quality of care often lagging behind other countries. Lord Darcy found that too many staff are disengaged, there are worryingly high levels of sickness absence, and that many people working in the system are still exhausted from the pandemic and its aftermath, which has resulted in a marked reduction in discretionary effort across all staff groups. The government completely agrees with this assessment. And we are on a mission to fix our broken NHS by driving fundamental reform to bring our analogue health service to the digital age. Through our 10-year health plan, we will cut those waiting lists, reducing waiting times and get the health service delivering for patients and staff once again. And these ambitions will only be possible thanks to the hard-working staff. So it's essential that doctors and others are properly valued, supported and looked after at work. Now, employers across the NHS play a pivotal role in looking after doctors. Strong and effective leadership is fundamental to building healthy organisational culture, and too many NHS organisations are falling short in this regard. I've recently been personally really shocked to hear stories, some of which we've heard again today, about the lack of support received by resident doctors, whether that be around shift patterns and rota changes, access to rest breaks whilst on duty, and basic things, really basic things from any employer, like hydration and the provision of decent food. Sleeping in cars, as we've heard today, not being able to go to close relatives or be the best person at your best friend's wedding. It's unbelievable, really. It cannot continue. It has to improve. We do expect better from trusts and employers, and we will make sure that that happens. We've brought an end to the industrial action by resident doctors that was impacting on the ability of the NHS to deliver a good quality service and having such a corrosive effect on the morale of the workforce. As part of that deal, resident doctors and dentists in training received an average uplift of just over 4% into the 2023-24 pay scales. That was on top of the average 8.8% uplift they received for 2023-24. The Government has committed to improving current exception reporting process and to work in partnership with the BMA and other health organisations to review the current system of training, as he highlights, and rotational placements. This is in addition to the current work being undertaken by NHS England to improve working lives. We want to work with the unions on the key issues that doctors are facing on the front line and improve their working lives. This does apply to all NHS staff. For example, at the moment we're working with the BMA Resident Doctors Committee to improve the exception reporting process. We know this is important to residents, which we agree to address as part of their pay deal. It's vital we look after the health and well-being of the whole NHS workforce. High-quality care and support for patients cannot be effectively provided without a compassionate and inclusive working environment. Now, the Honourable Gentleman lists a number of actions. Some of them are more easily addressed than others, and we would expect, as part of a supportive culture in trust, to include many of these. And I do accept that some of them are more challenging and will involve discussions with NHS England and the Government and trusts, but I don't think that many of these are beyond local trusts and local systems working with the profession to resolve. The mental health of doctors and all NHS staff is incredibly important, and during the pandemic we saw strain and trauma that was placed on staff. We owe it to them, who do so much for patients, to ensure they're properly supported in return. Now, the NHS does offer occupational health and wellbeing services for staff when they need it, but provision can be patchy, and there is a drive to improve the quality of those services across the NHS. This can not only reduce sickness, absence and improve retention, but proactive and preventative occupational health can also lead to improvements in productivity and in the long run save taxpayers money. Access to specialist mental health support is important. I know that services such as the Practitioner Health Programme, which we've heard about this afternoon, are highly valued by many doctors, and NHS England is currently reviewing the mental health and wellbeing support that is available across the NHS and is looking at how that can be made more equitable and sustainable in the future. There is no doubt that we need to continue to improve mental health support that is available to NHS staff, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of that review. NHS England is also moving forward with a joint initiative with NHS charities to invest £10 million in health and wellbeing initiatives for staff. This is providing grants for better facilities and investing in improved wellbeing support. Can I just highlight for a moment about violence, which I don't think we particularly highlighted in the Honourable Gentleman's speech. The threat of violence in the workplace is sadly another thing that NHS staff are dealing with, as we saw in last week's horrific assault in Oldham. And I really want to extend my wishes to the nurse and her family for a speedy recovery, and I know we all do. I want to reiterate that this Government takes a zero-tolerance approach to this type of behaviour. Doctors, nurses and all healthcare workers are the backbone of our NHS, and they should be able to care for patients without any fear of violence or abuse. At a national level, NHS England is focused on improving workplace experience with the NHS People Promise and the NHS Retention Programme, addressing the issues that do matter to staff, whether that be improving opportunities for flexible working, tackling racism and discrimination, preventing and reducing violence in the workplace, or improving facilities so that staff can have that basic rest and recover opportunity. Resident doctors face many challenges as they progress through postgraduate medical training, as the Honourable Gentleman has outlined. Expanding access to less than full-time training, rationalising and reforming statutory and mandatory training, and increasing choice and flexibility over rota management are just some of the things we are looking at doing to improve their working lives. We're also currently working with NHS England to support the GP workforce, including measures to boost recruitment, address the reasons why doctors are leaving the profession and encourage them to return to practice. The NHS is working to address training bottlenecks so there's enough GPs for the future and patients can get the care they need. We've provided £82 million of additional funding for 24-25 to address GP unemployment and support the recruitment of over 1,000 new GPs. So in conclusion, Sir John, through the 10-year plan, we are engaging widely with staff, patients and the public, listening to their views on how we need to reform and modernise the NHS. This applies equally to the NHS as an employer. Our ambition is for the NHS to become a modern, innovative and supportive employer. This is a necessity if we're able to continue to attract and retain skilled and experienced professionals, give them the support they deserve as they care for the nation, and build a robust and resilient NHS. Now, I look forward to working with NHS England. The Honourable Gentleman will bring great expertise to this work in this House and members more broadly to make this an absolute reality.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that this House has considered the welfare of doctors. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.